Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Umar Khalid. But today is the 14th of October 2021. These are the stories that we'll be discussing during the course of the show. We'll begin with the meeting that has been held between the Iranian Chief of Staff and of course our Chief of the Army Staff, in which the different issues of mutual concern were discussed, and of course cooperation on counter-terrorism was also discussed. The Iranian chief also met with the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, and other important officials. This is going to be our leading story of the day. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns what is happening to the minorities in India, especially when it concerns Muslims. We've also talked about Christians yesterday, in which how the Christian community is also being targeted by the VHP and the BJP. Nevertheless, the Muslims also are being targeted. One of the examples comes through an article that has been published in the Washington Post by Rana Ayub, in which she talks about two youth, one the son of a powerful BJP icon and the other the son of a Muslim Indian actor, and how treatment is meted differently to the both of them under different circumstances, which shows a discriminatory attitude as far as the Muslim community of India is concerned. This is going to be our second segment of the day. Then we will be talking about the World Sight Day. Ladies and gentlemen, today is the World Sight Day. How important is it to take care of the sights of our eyes, of our talking about Facebook, that is going to change rules on attacking public figures on its platforms. It will now count activists and journalists as involuntary public figures so as to increase protection against harassment and bullying targeted at these groups. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be talking about William Shatner. If you haven't watched Star Trek, go. We've always watched the beginning at PTV when we were younger, in which he always started with his monologue to go beyond the boundaries, and this is what he's doing himself. He, at the age of 90, is going to become the world's oldest space traveler. He boarded a rocket ship flown by billionaire Jeff Bezos' company, Blue Origin. Well, of course, his dreams also came true. Let's begin with our first segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns regional cooperation against terrorism. This was something that was discussed in the meeting between the Iranian military chief of the Chief of the Army Staff, General Qamar Javed Bajwa. When we talk of Iran-Pakistan cooperation, both the countries are cooperating in different spheres. Nevertheless, this visit of the Iranian chief is extremely important in this current scenario of regional change, especially when it concerns Afghanistan and the other important regional changes, also what is happening in India as well. So, when Qamar Javed Bajwa Sahib and the visiting Iranian Chief of Staff, Major General Mohammad Bagheri, meet at the General Headquarters, of course, important things are discussed, important points of views are put on the table, and joint cooperation is also discussed for enhanced counter-terrorism, as well as training exchanges between the two countries. A wide range of issues, including the situation in Afghanistan, regional security, border management, was also discussed during this visit between the two army chiefs, and also fencing along the Pak-Iran border, bilateral defense cooperation. And the Iranian commander also met with the Prime Minister, the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff Committee, and he desires for expansion of military to military ties, specifically in counterterrorism and training domains. The Iranian news agency IRNA, when the Iranian chief came to Pakistan, said that the joint resolve of the Iranian, Pakistani and military officials is on 6 important topics, and that includes to further enhance bilateral cooperation, develop security at the common borders, contribute to regional stability, forge a common vision for peace and stability in Afghanistan, consult on issues of the Islamic world, and fight against terrorism. These are very important topics as far as Pakistan or even Iran is concerned, because the stable region is the need of the hour, the need of the day. And of course, there are many elements in the region that want instability in the countries, so that the region becomes more and more unstable, and that is what countries like Pakistan and Iran do not want, and that is why both want to work jointly on counter-terrorism, on stability in the region as well. When the Iranian defense chief met with the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, he described the Pakistan-Iran border as a border of peace and friendship. This was taken out in a statement by the Prime Minister's office. This is a statement of our Prime Minister. The Prime Minister also talked about the importance of the steps taken for the enhancement of security on both sides and shared Pakistan's perspective on the latest developments in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is something and a very important issue at this current moment, and it is being discussed with all the important stakeholders in the region that include Iran as well. Our Prime Minister also stressed that neighbors of Afghanistan, both Pakistan and Iran, have a direct stake in peace and security in the region. Of course, and he also laid emphasis on the close cooperation and coordination between the two countries. So a very important visit. The Iranian chief is also to visit Karachi during this 3-day official visit to his neighboring country of Pakistan. Let's go to our second story, ladies and gentlemen, and the second story concerns what is happening in India as far as the minorities is concerned, whether it be the Christian community that is of course under threat, whether it be under their Hindu caste system, the Dalits and the other low castes that are under threat, or specifically whether it be the Muslim community that is under threat, whether it be in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir or outside. This has been brought to the forefront in two very important articles. The first by Time magazine, which talks about India heading for an anti-Muslim genocide, and an opinion piece in the Washington Post by Rana Ayub that talks about two suns, two systems of justice, but one message for the Indians: fall in line. More in the following report.
Saffronization of India, instigated by Hindu nationalist BJP government, has rendered the multi-ethnic country a recurring nightmare for religio-ethnic minorities. Beaten, humiliated, harassed and intimidated by unbridled Hindu fundamentalist goons, minority segments are living in continued state of fear and horror in Modi's fascist despotism. The violence is overwhelming, rampant and common, but most alarming fact is that it's perpetrated under state patronage and also very acceptable in the jingoistic society. The unfolding events vividly depict that India is 21st century apartheid regime executing Israeli-style brutalization and marginalization of Muslims and other minorities. It's not just suppression of farmers' protest by brutal force which unraveled Indian autocratic credentials, but also two high-profile arrests in India, tainting secular democratic stature of imperial imposter India. Modi's cabinet ministers are brazenly hurling threats at protesters farmers, along with vilification and demonization of minorities. The escalation of communal violence, religious intolerance, discrimination and suppression of dissent after Modi's ascendance to power indicate that India is en route towards majoritarian autocracy, which will ultimately impose a final solution upon minorities. The bigoted and intolerant India poses a grave threat to regional peace and stability, as BJP leaders have publicly voiced their hegemonic aspirations in South Asia. As India paints himself as secular democracy in global forums, international community must hold it accountable for its blemished human rights and civil liberties record.
This civil liberties record should be put under scrutiny as far as India is concerned. To talk more about what is happening in India on different fora, we've been joined by Mandeep Singh Bajwa. He's a journalist who joins us from across the border in India. Mandeep Bajwa, thank you very much to have joined us. I'd like your point of view on different issues that, of course, welcome to our show as well. Mandeep Saab, I'd like your point of view on different issues that pertain to India. Let's begin with the farmers' protest and what happened in Assam. We saw how there was an Indian journalist who kind of jumped on the dead body of one of the victims. Then we have had this latest article that has come from Rana Ayub in the Washington Post that talks about discrimination as far as two sons, of course, one being Muslim, one being Hindu, and one of the sons who's Hindu is concerned or associated with an incident that happened with the farmers community, which brings me to the farmers protest. How do you find all of these incidents coinciding but targeting the minorities of India?
Well, as a farmer myself, I'm a very strong supporter of the farmers' protest. I'm a strong supporter of farmers' rights and vocal critic of the government's farm policies. They seem to be trying to bring about greater corporatization of agriculture, as well as trying to shift a large segment of the rural population to the cities, where no doubt they'll be employed as labor in the new smart cities which the ruling party wants to set up. Well, the farmers' protest, they have a lot of, ground and, which they've covered, and they have certainly got their, legitimate rights, and, they're determined to fight it out. The government stand has been very obstinate, very obdurate, and extremely opaque, and they seem to be trying to crush the farmers' protest through force, and through the use of dirty tricks,
But I mean, why do that when at the end of the day, if a country calls itself a democracy, it needs to talk with all its segments and come to a proper solution through negotiations, through talks, and especially when it comes to a protest that has been going on now for more than a year.
Well, as we all know, the ultimate answer to all these is the ballot box. I mean, there is no other solution till this government is thrown out, and certainly I would urge all Indians to vote this government out, and therefore we'll get a solution to some of our problems. And the way this government is behaving and the way the ruling party is behaving, I don't think they want to solve any of these problems. They want to crush them through force.
But why is that so? I mean, to be very frank, Mandeep, how far can they go as far as crushing the different segments of the society are concerned just for their own benefit?
No, I don't think they've shown any restraint whatsoever. They've gone to the maximum extent, and they are doing whatever they can do, and they're getting exposed every day. And the farmers' protest is getting stronger, and they have chosen the wrong people to target, because as I never tire of telling my friends in the BJP, the farmers have great resilience, great strength, and there is a very great moral force which binds them together, which strengthens them, which gives them strength to take on adversities, and particularly this government's drive to corporatize agriculture. So they cannot win against farmers, and at the end of the day, the public sympathy will always be with the farmers, because they see them. They see that they're sitting in their city. They're some of them agitating inside the city, others sitting on outskirts of the city. That they see them. They see them on television. They see them on various channels. They see them in person, and they say they're God-fearing people, honest, God-fearing people, simple people, but determined. So they cannot crush them. That is something which...
when you talk of crushing, Mandeep, it brings me to a very heinous incident, that of the son of Junior Home Minister Ajay Mishra, Ashish Mishra, and of course this unfortunate incident as far as the farmers community is concerned, where a number of farmers were crushed by his car. And the way the whole government has treated this case, isn't it discriminatory against of course the farmers community? And the whole protest that has been going on, isn't it kind of indirectly a part of crushing this movement that is going on?
See, unfortunately, they seem to think that they can use force of this kind and all to crush the farmers. They're sadly mistaken. You cannot crush the farmers. They're much too strong. And they look at their numbers. And apart from numbers, their own inner strength. And, people are surprised to see the way that they have been organizing the agitation till now. I mean, totally peaceful, and with using their own resources, and getting strength every day. So, I think the BJP must do a rethink, and, this obstinacy on their part must be given up. But at the end of the day, I think they'll only realize the mistake they made once they're defeated at the hustings, which doesn't seem very far at this rate. And I look forward to that day.
But Mandeep, looking at the last two polls, when the first polls happened and the BJP government came into power, and of course what happened after that, we thought that in these last elections that they will not get the majority, but they even got a stronger majority. Are they slowly and steadily turning the mindsets of especially the Hindu community that is in a majority in India, so, to make them think that other segments of the society, whether it be the farmers community, whether it be the Muslims, whether it be the Sikhs, that they need to be put under a certain pressure in order for the government to move forward in the right direction? What is the mindset that is going on?
I think we must realize that this is not a majority versus minority question. It's a question of survival. And to be brutally frank, you cannot eat religion. And with the pandemic in full swing and the economy going nowhere, and rampant unemployment, and all the problems which people are facing, I think people are getting fed up of this government, and I don't think it will be very long before they'll be voted out. And in a democracy, that is the ultimate. And you can keep fighting, you can keep agitating, you can keep debating in parliament and all. But if the government doesn't listen, then the only recourse is to vote it out. So that is the ultimate weapon which every Indian,
But Mandeep, you said the only recourse is to vote a government out. But hasn't this very government come back with an even greater majority in these last elections?
But there is a qualitative change. There is a qualitative change in the last 2 years. I think everybody is getting fed up now, and I think the farmer attention has been the last straw, because the farming community constitutes over 60% of the population of this country, and if you seek to repress them, then you are seeking your own political death, and it's as simple as that. And as I cannot be more brutally frank than that. And unfortunately, these people are surrounded by security and by crowds of fawning, obsequious courtiers and sycophants. They're just out of touch with reality on the ground, and they shut their eyes and close their ears, and believe in whatever propaganda their own organizations churn out, and at the end of the day, they lost touch with reality.
All right. One last question to you, Mandeep Saab. When we see the different communities and how they are being handled, in the latest opinion piece in the Washington Post by Rana Ayub, she takes two cases, one of Ashish Mehra and the second of Aryan Khan, who's the son of Shah Rukh Khan. And of course, two different cases, one more virulent than the other, but one case in which the son of a Muslim, and of course himself being maybe belonging to a Muslim community, being handled in a more severe manner than the other, who is the son of a home minister and of course a BJP home minister, despite the fact that it is the son of the home minister who's killed people and the other is involved in drugs directly or indirectly. But putting a parallel between two cases, does that also show that there is a parallel as far as how the Hindu community is being treated in India now and how the other communities are being treated in India now? Do you feel, as of course as an Indian national, that the whole legacy that Gandhi had put forward of living and letting live, of being together in harmony, is being destroyed slowly and steadily?
Well, the thing is that injustice cuts across all boundaries. There is no caste or creed or religion or whatever as far as injustice is concerned. Everybody is affected by it. And how does Pakistan figure in this? I don't understand. I mean, look at, can Pakistan say that it's giving justice to all its citizens? I mean, look at the way your minority are treated. Is this, do you really think this is the Qaeda-Azam's Pakistan? So I end there. But you must reflect on what you're saying also.
All right. Thank you very much, Mandeep Singh Bajwa, journalist from India, joining us and talking to us about, of course, the different issues that concern India, whether it be the farmers' protest and the incident that concerned Ajay Mishra's son, Ashish Mishra, as comparing that to Aryan Khan's case, and how both cases are being treated on a very different tangent, and at the same time the whole way the different communities, the minorities in India are also being treated, whether it be the Sikh community, the farmers' community, or the Muslim community that are being treated on a very different level than their own Hindu community. This is something that needs to not only be looked upon internally by the authorities within India, but also externally, so that the right pressure could be put on India to change its attitude as far as its minorities communities are concerned. Let's come to our next segment, and that concerns the World Sight Day. Today is the World Sight Day. 14th of October is something that is, of course, celebrated across the world as that. Sight, when we talk of eyes, when we talk of our eyesight, is something that most of the times we neglect, but this is something that we need to take care of with utmost importance, because ask those who are devoid of sight on how important this virtue, this part of your body is. So it is extremely pertinent to understand how important it is to take care of your sight, and how the different means and measures in case you do get a disease to understand that and to take care of that at the earliest. More in the following report.
There are myriad taxing global challenges such as pandemic, poverty, conflict, and refugees, etc., which require concerted global efforts to eliminate and dilute their impact. Amid mushrooming global health and socio-economic challenges, it's cognate to circumvent the preventable medical disorders through robust awareness campaigns and global pledge to pool the resources. Fluent areas. The underlying rationale to observe this day rests on the consensus that if maximum individuals are given access to affordable and high-quality eye care, then more people can contribute to economic growth. In order to commit itself to global eye care, the United Nations General Assembly adopted its first resolution on eye health in July 2021 after the championing of the UN Friends of Vision, a group of country representatives committed to elevating the issue.
Now, we'll talk more about the issue concerning sight, how important is it to conserve it, how important is it to take care of it, and how important is it also to take care of all those diseases when you get them concerning your eyesight. We've been joined by the country director, Sight Savers. Thank you very much, Sayyida Munazza Gilani, to have joined us in our show. Let's talk a little bit about sight. How important is it for a normal person, and why do we neglect it so often?
Usually in a country like Pakistan, it's mainly due to lack of awareness and education regarding the significance of eye health, and people tend to avoid getting treatment well in time. So a lot of problems arises because people don't get medical treatment in time, their problems are not detected, and the problem aggravates. And when the problem aggravates, it leads to blindness. And in Pakistan, I must admit this, that 80% of the blindness is avoidable. By avoidable, I mean like 80% of the eye care problems, if are detected timely and get treated, they could be prevented from blindness.
How do you detect eye problems at an early level? A lot of people I have seen come with advanced stages of the eye disease, and they said, oh, we did not know, we did not comprehend, we did not understand, we thought it was something, an allergic reaction, it would go away, but in fact it became worse. How does one understand?
Actually, it needs a lot of awareness, mass awareness for the general public, and for that purpose, another important aspect is the availability of the eye care professionals at the right level, closer to the communities. Especially our primary healthcare system. If the primary healthcare system is equipped with right number of people and well-trained professionals who are equipped to detect eye care problems, a lot of eye care problems can be prevented from blindness.
A lot of people also do not go to these healthcare professionals. They take what we say, local treatments, or somebody tells them, an elder tells them to do this and they'll follow it. A friend tells them to do something else and they'll follow that as well. Sometimes they come under peer pressure. How to make them understand to go to the right person at the right time?
Exactly. You have pinpointed the exact cause of all these problems. We have acknowledged this problem, and for that purpose we have trained more than 115,000 lady health workers who are the backbone of the primary health care system in primary eye care. We have equipped them in a way so that they are able to detect and examine the common eye care problems like a common eye infection, conjunctivitis, or a neonatal problem with the newborn child, or any elderly person. So with these trainings, these lady health workers are now able to rightly detect the eye care problem, and then refer them to the right and appropriate level of eye care facility which is available in the nearby communities where the person is residing. So this is the role primary healthcare system is now playing for the prevention of blindness. Before, when the lady health workers were not trained, common eye health problems were the major cause of so many complicated eye care problems, because those common problems were not treated well in time, and then they were leading to blindness.
Because 80% of the cases in blindness can be avoided if they are detected at the right time and treated with the right medicine.
Exactly. Let me give you an example of a disease called trachoma. In common language, in our language, it's called kukre. Trachoma is a problem in which your eyelashes turn inwards, and when the person blinks his or her eyes, it scratches the cornea, and it can cause a lot of damage to your eyes. But if this trachoma problem is just treated with a simple ointment, antibiotic ointment, the trachoma can be stopped from further progression, and you can actually save and restore the sight of a person.
But you know, you've talked about the lady health workers. I think this is an extremely important initiative, and more lady health workers and even male health workers need to be put into the field, not only in urban areas but more so in rural areas where people don't understand a lot of things, and sometimes they realize when it is too late. Now, which brings me to a very important factor and its association as well, that is education. Whether it be urban centers or rural centers, do you feel that we need to incorporate one way or the other health sciences at the primary or secondary level, or maybe have lady health workers go to every single school or in the urban or rural area, so that they can ascertain if a child is suffering from a disease or if administrative staff is suffering from something?
In this regard, we have a very robust program called School Eye Health Program or School Health Integrated Program. Under that program, we train school teachers in the early detection of a vision problem, eyesight problem, which is called refractive error. When the child is suffering from a problem, any eye-related problem, it can be detected by a very simple screening method. It just takes 10 to 15. In Islamabad right now, we are collaborating with the Federal Ministry of Education, and we are implementing a program where we'll be screening 200,000 children in next 2 years' time. And those who will, and let me share this, that around 4 to 5% of the children in Pakistan, they have refractive error, unaddressed refractive error. So you can imagine that the scale of the problem is so huge, and if not addressed timely, it can lead towards so many complications.
4 to 5% is not a negligible amount.
Exactly. So we have a plan, and previously during the last 2 decades, we have screened up to 1.8 million children in Pakistan in 5 major cities, metropolitan cities, and those children were then provided with free pair of spectacles, and also provided with free of cost surgical treatments, and also any other complication.
That is very important, because a lot of times the communities are unable to pay for the services, especially when it comes to expensive surgeries, or even sometimes lenses or spectacles that you need.
With the appropriate level of technology and equipment. So what we do, we first identify the existing gaps, and then in collaboration with the ministries and health departments and education departments, we equip them to address those gaps. So in a way, we are not creating any parallel structure or any NGO separately.
You're just helping those.
We are helping the existing systems to perform better. So in that way, we have been able to reduce the blindness. By we, I mean not only Sightsavers, but other peer international NGOs, and especially the Ministry of Health at federal and provincial level. We have been able to reduce the blindness prevalence in just 2 decades to half. Like the first survey, which was done in 1987 to 2000, it was 1987 to 1998, it was like 1.8%. And then the next survey from 2002 to 2004, the National Blindness Survey, it came down to 0.9%. So almost half of the blindness was reduced, and this was possible due to the efforts of public-private partnership. We trained a big number of surgeons in cataract surgeries and other subspecialties. We provided Government of Pakistan with necessary equipment and technology to treat the eye care problems. In the same way, we supported and implemented school eye health care programs so that children can be prevented from blindness. And in the same way, we also did some outreach camps in the beginning when these eye facilities were not present at the district headquarter hospital or at the THQ hospital. But now the situation is much, much better if I compare this from 2 decades ago when only the tertiary level hospitals were delivering eye care services. But now the situation is much, much improved, and we find eye care professionals, well-trained professionals at THQ level, at DHQ level, very well-equipped hospitals and eye departments. So the situation is improving, but still there are provinces like Balochistan, South Punjab, KP, Interior Sindh, where still there is a lot of disparity for the distribution.
When you talk
good
of
quality.
disparities, what needs to be done then?
This need a focus from the government side. They need to address this disparity in terms of establishing new hospitals in those areas where the hospitals are not available. They need to train healthcare professionals in 5,000 plus CSR rate, which is considered a very good rate. But this rate is not benefiting everyone. This is only for the urban and the big metropolitan cities. If you go to the remote and rural areas, the CSR rate comes down to 200, 500, up to 1,000 in some areas. And the worst affected province currently is Balochistan, South Punjab, Interior Sindh, and some part of the KP as well. Punjab is performing quite well.
All right. Sayyida Munazza Gilani Sahiba, when it comes to a follow-up, a lot of times I've seen also through friends and through family members that you get your primary care done, whether it be for your eyes or anything, but you don't subsequently go back to the doctor to have a follow-up check. And a lot of times complications develop following surgeries or following procedures, or even sometimes with spectacles you don't have the right number, which takes the toll on your eyesight in the longer run. But a lot of people don't want to return or don't have the inclination to return. How to change that mindset as well?
For that purpose, there is a need to run social behavior change campaigns at a mass level. By social behavior change, I mean we need to make use of the print and electronic media, the social media, local radio networks, FM channels and all that. And we need to spread the message as much as possible. Today, it's a World Sight Day, and today's theme is Love Your Eyes, which means take care of your eyes, and take care of your eyes in a way that you are not becoming dependent on other because of the blindness or any other complications. So, in that aspect, we are running different programs with our partners, both in the government and non-government sector, where we are running social behavior change campaigns. We are disseminating messages through local community-based organizations. We do involve persons with disabilities and their representative bodies to spread the message. We involve the other stakeholders who are prime responsible for the delivery of eye care and delivery of health care in general at the grassroots level. So we do involve a lot of stakeholders to spread the message and for this social behavior change. And we do develop quite a lot of interactive material, both in writing and verbal and pictorial forms to educate the people. And this has been proved really, really useful for children. Children are really responsive and very receptive to learning new ideas and to learning new knowledge about different subjects. So we have been really happy with the results.
What about the adults? A lot of times what happens with the adults and with the people of a certain age is that they refuse to take another person's point of view, even if the other person might be correct. How to also go forward in that direction, because we see a lot of cataract in the middle-aged persons, and many a times people are afraid to go for surgery. Many a times they say, oh, we'll take care with XYZ ointment, or that is not really the right thing to do in such a case. How to make them understand what is right and what isn't?
We have witnessed that when you bring along a person who has benefited from your services, a person who was having cataract and was operated with free of cost services available, and he or she is satisfied with the result of the surgery, if you take along the person and he or she talks to the community where he is living. So this is a kind of a word of mouth.
I think that's a very important thing to do.
Yeah, so word of mouth is a very effective, I would say, tool,
especially in rural areas.
especially in the rural areas and even in the urban areas. If a patient is satisfied and he or she goes back to the family and friends and talk about that how much useful this surgery was and how his or her life has been transformed, it really makes a difference. So I would say.
All right, and you are making a difference through your contribution towards alleviating the sight of so many people of different age groups, whether it be children or adults. So is your company, and we wish you all the very best, and we hope to see more inclusiveness as far as understanding what the different diseases are concerned and how to treat them at the right time with the right medicine and going to the right person.
Exactly.
So that you can be a better, you can go forward in your life seeing things in the right color, in the right way, without any aid. Thank you very much, Sayyida Munazza Gilani
Thank you
Sahiba,
so
Country
much.
Director, Sight Savers Pakistan, to have joined us and to have talked to us extensively about sight and how we need to take care of it. It is one of our 6 senses, so we need to be very pertinent about it. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Let's go to our next segment, ladies and gentlemen. That concerns social media. Facebook is apparently going to change rules to attack public figures on its platforms. Now, Facebook is going to now count activists and journalists as involuntary public figures, and so increase the protection against harassment and bullying that is targeted at these groups. Which this was a statement that was taken out by its global safety chief in an interview. And it is very important because in the whole context of how a lot of people are being harassed, especially when it comes to the popular names concerned with any field, we need to be vigilant of that, and we need to take care properly of that. Harassment is something that has a lot of repercussions on different fora, and it becomes the responsibility of social media giants such as Facebook to take the appropriate measures, and apparently it is doing exactly that. So let's see how these rules will apply in the coming months and weeks, and how they will be advantageous for the personalities that of course change perspective, and we are talking of the public personalities, whether it be actors, whether it be influencers, or whether it be politicians. Let's go to our last segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns a hero of one of the TV series that used to come on Pakistan television ages ago, Star Trek. William Shatner became a legend through this television series when he talked about going beyond frontiers. His dream came true in the true sense of the word when at the age of 90 he boarded a rocket ship that was flown by billionaire Jeff Bezos' company Blue Origin. You can see the in the parallel window some visuals of that. Now William Shatner has played this astronomer, this explorer of the cosmos, Captain James Kirk, in the Star Trek series, and he eventually did it for real this Wednesday. And he's also become the oldest person in space aboard a rocket ship that was of course flown by Jeff Bezos. He was one of the 4 passengers to journey for 10 minutes and 17 seconds through the edge of space above the autonomous 60-foot tall New Shepard spacecraft that took of course off from the Blue Origin launch site from rural Texas. And then of course he had this amazing journey, and which I'm sure a lot of us would like to go to as well in the coming days. Nevertheless, the oldest man to go into space, and one who's really actually done that in the real sense. Kudos to you, William Shatner. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow. New segment, stories that pertain to us as a society, as a nation, and as individuals. Till then, kindly have your vaccinations done for the pandemic that is COVID-19. If you haven't still, keep following the standard operating procedures, and also be very vigilant of dengue that is slowly increasing as its number of cases is also going on the rise in different capitals. Allah Hafiz.